Hey guys, Phil here, hope you're all well. What you're looking at in front of you is a shed load of flux. Now the reason I'm making this video is I get asked what type of flux I use, and I thought, you know what, I'll make a video and just clear it all up. So yeah, I'm just gonna make a video showing you what type of flux I use, why I use it. So yeah, let's crack on with the video. What I'll do is I'll go from left to right and tell you what type of flux I use. I generally use 3 different types of fluxes. I use a solid flux, a tacky flux and a liquid flux. But I'll start off with this flux just here. This flux is 100% rosin. You can see it, this is what it looks like. It's got the consistency of a boiled sweet, but it's a little bit more brittle. You can see some of it's turned to powder in the bag. Now because this is 100% rosin, it's really good, but I use it very rarely. This stuff is activated rosin. You can see it says here activated rosin. Basically it's tree sap, that's what rosin is. What they do is they take it, they filter it so they get all the particles of bark, maybe bits of leaf, bits of twig, that type of stuff in there, and they filter it, and then what they do to make it activated rosin is they add preservatives and additives to it to make it better for soldering. It's already very good for soldering, but they add just a little bit more to it just to stabilize it and make it better. Now this stuff is nuclear flux. When I say nuclear flux, I mean it. This stuff is absolutely brilliant when you've got something like a corroded PCB and you're trying to get to the pads. A great example would be something like a Commodore Amiga 600 or 1200, where you've had a capacitor that's leaked, or say on a 500 plus where the battery's leaked and you're trying to get to those pads and you can't get there because all that crusty layers on top. You've tried the more traditional flux and you just can't get down to that pad that's under that crust. This stuff will help you get there. It's really good stuff. Now this 500 gram bag I've had for years, guys. I'm probably never going to have to buy any of this stuff again because you use very little of it. Like I said, it's like every now and again, maybe 1 in 10 times where you've got to use it. You know, normally you can use traditional tacky flux to get it, but this stuff is nuclear. Now there's some benefits to using this, and like I said, because it's 100% rosin, it's really good, but there are some downsides to using this stuff. Some people can be allergic to this. Some people are allergic to rosin. If you touch it, you may come out in hives. Now, you can handle it like this in its solid form. What I wouldn't do is melt this stuff and smell it. That would be stupid. Don't do that. But like I said, it's very good, but there are some downsides. The other downside to it is once it turns into powder like this, if you get any of that on your fingers and you get your fingers wet, forget about it. It's Stickyville, USA, and you are not getting it off your hands. You can wash your hands all day and it won't come off. The only thing that will get it off is IPA, and I hope you got a lot of it because you're gonna need it. Another downside to this, guys, is with it being 100% rosin, is you've got to clean it off the board. You cannot leave this on the board. You have to clean it. This is not no clean, this is clean. You've got to get it off the board because it will actually damage the PCB and the pads if you leave this on the board. So you've got to clean it off. Another downside to this is it smokes like crazy. With it being 100% rosin, the smoke this gives off is insane. Now it's not an unpleasant smell. If you know anything about rosin, If you know the smell of it, it smells like pine. It's got an earthy, really nice pine smell to it. Now, like I said, I wouldn't smell this stuff, but the truth is you're not going to help it. You're going to smell it because it's going to pump out smoke. It's like a smoke bomb when you touch this with a soldering iron. So yeah, like I said, this stuff's very good for corrosion and that type of stuff, but you just need to be aware there are some downsides to using it. Now a bag like this, a 500 gram bag, I can't remember how much I paid for it years ago. I think it was somewhere around about £10. But like I said, this stuff will probably last me, what, 3 lifetimes? I mean, this little chunk here will last me 2 or 3 years. So, you know, I'm never going to have to buy any of this stuff ever again. It's very good, but boy, it's got some downsides. Now the next type I use is Tacky Flux. These three are pretty much the same. They're Tacky Flux. This is Amtech, you can see there, it's Amtech. This one's ChipQuik, and this one's MG Chemicals 8341. They're all very good fluxes. The Amtech is round about, I would say, £15 for a 10cc tube, but there's a caveat to that, and I'll come to that in a second. The ChipQuik is the most expensive. This is a 30cc tube. This one costs about £35. Yeah, that's a little expensive, guys, but it's really good flux. This no clean from MG Chemicals, the 8341, will cost you around about £10. Again, it's very good. I would say these are very close to each other when it comes to their performance. Now I'll go back to the Amtech. The Amtech here in the UK is very difficult to get the genuine stuff. This is my last tube of genuine Amtech, so I use it very sparingly. 90% of the Amtech that's in the UK, in my personal opinion, is total fake. You've got to be very careful. I used to use this quite a lot back in the day, but I've moved over to the ChipQuik and the MG Chemicals. The reason for that, because you know it's difficult to get this stuff. Yeah, you're going to pay a little bit more for the ChipQuik, but you know it's genuine. And the reason you know it's genuine is these two, you can buy them off Amazon, not a problem. When you buy the ChipQuik off Amazon, it says distributed by Amazon, sold by ChipQuik Inc. So you know it's 100% ChipQuik. And it's the same with the MG Chemicals. It's distributed by Amazon, sold by MG Chemicals. So you know it's 100% genuine. The Amtech, you cannot buy this. I don't know why Amtech won't sell you this. The only way you can get Amtech Flux is if you buy the stuff in bulk, which is ask me, is a stupid way of selling flux. It's very good flux, but it's a nightmare to get the genuine stuff, guys. So I swapped over to ChipQuik and the MG Chemicals a couple of years ago now, but I've still got this tube of Amtech that I keep for special occasions. Not that it's any better than the other two, I just keep it just to have around to say, yeah, I've still got a tube of genuine Amtech flux. Now, what I use these for is surface mount. Anything surface mount, if I'm soldering a surface mount chip, if I'm removing a surface mount chip, if I'm, you know, anything surface mount, if I'm doing something like a Dreamcast BIOS, a Japanese cake, a Dreamcast BIOS install, these are the ones I'll use. I generally use the ChipQuik to do that, but I could also use the other two, they're equally as good. But yeah, these are my go-to Tacky fluxes. This is a Tacky Flux, it's just in a jar. Obviously the other ones are in syringes, but yeah, they're the Tacky Flux I use. And the final flux I use is this MG Chemicals No Clean Flux. This is a liquid based flux. This is actually rosin free. There's no rosin in it, you can tell that because it says halogen free written on it. It's made up of a different recipe. They don't have to use rosin for its main ingredients to function. Now all I do is I take this bottle and I put it in a little squirty container like this that allows me to apply it to a joint or a pad or whatever when I'm using it. This stuff is very good, guys. It will cost you round about £25 in the UK, but like I said, it's well worth it. Now you may be asking what I use this for. If I'm doing any type of flat flex cable, I'm soldering in a flat flex cable, this is the stuff I use. The reason for that is because it's no clean. If you're soldering in a flat flex cable, you can't obviously lift the cable once it's in there to get rid of the flux that might go under it. Where with this stuff you can just squirt it on there and leave it. It's inert, it doesn't do any damage whatsoever, and it works perfectly fine. Also, what I'll use it for as well is I have it sitting on my bench just over here. So if I'm doing any type of soldering and I may go, oh, I don't quite like the look of that joint, it looks a bit iffy, I'll just get a bit of no clean, squirt it on there, tap it with a soldering iron, and it's nice and shiny and jobs are good. But yeah, that's the liquid flux I use. You know, it's value for money for me. It's really good stuff. I can't remember if I talked about this when I actually did each individual flux, so I'll quickly go over it now. These fluxes here are rosin based fluxes. This one isn't. This is halogen free, that's how you can tell. It's non-rosin. Now this here, if you use it, you would definitely need to clean it off the board. If you leave it on there, it will damage the board. This is no clean flux. It's got additives added to it to make it inert. It neutralizes the rosin. But again, like I said, if I mentioned it, it's a very good practice to clean it off. If you know, no one wants to open your PCB and look at it and see horrible nasty flux all over it. So if you can, clean it off. This stuff is no clean. You can leave it on the board. It leaves no residue, and it's inert to the board and won't damage it. So yeah, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up a little experiment, and I'm going to show you all these fluxes in action. Okay, what I want to do is show you these fluxes in action. Now the first one I'm going to do is actually no flux, because I want to show you what it looks like when you don't use any flux and how horrible it looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm just going to fill it with some solder. You can see the vapors coming off the soldering iron. That's the flux being burnt away. That's contained in the solder. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait until that solder goes nice and crusty and all the flux has been burnt away, and then I'll show you what it looks like when you try and solder with no flux. If you take a look at my soldering iron tip, you can see that flux has been burnt away and it's gone all crusty on the end of my soldering iron. The flux has gone all crusty. So what I'm going to do now is show you what it looks like when you don't use flux. And there you go, it's just a horrible blobby mess that just doesn't wet very well. What I'm going to show you now is the 100% rosin, the activated rosin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break a nice chunk of it off. That would be nice right there. If I take that, put that there like that, that's perfect. And what I'm going to do again is I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm going to load it up with solder, and I'm going to let all the flux burn away so we get that horrible crusty solder again. and then I'll come in and show you what this stuff is like. Okay, as you can see, the flux has been burnt off on my soldering iron tip. It's gone all crusty. Now let me show you what this stuff is like. Now there's a trick to using this, guys. You don't go straight in. What you need to do is melt it. So the best thing to do is just come along and gently, there you go, you can see it melting. Just come along and gently move in a circular motion like this until it starts to melt. Then it will melt like it has, and then all you do is you come in and you just wet the solder, and as you can see, it works absolutely fantastic. Wonderful. Now obviously, guys, with this being 100% rosin activated flux, you can't leave that on there. You'd have to clean it off because, you know, it would damage the PCB. What I'm going to show you now is the Amtech Flux. So I'm just going to take some Amtech and I'm going to squirt some onto the Vero board like that. I'll take my soldering iron again and I'll load it with solder, and we'll wait until the flux has been burnt off. And if you take a look at my soldering iron tip, you can see that flux has all been burnt off. It's gone nice and crusty on the end of my soldering iron tip. So again, I'm going to come in and we'll just have a go at the soldering, and there we can see beautifully wetted, absolutely beautiful shiny solder. Okay, let's do some ChipQuik. So I'm going to take my tube of ChipQuik and I'm going to put some on the Vero board. There we go, that should be enough. Do the same with my soldering iron tip again. I'm going to load it full of solder, and again I'm going to wait until the flux is burnt off. Okay, as you can see, the flux has been burnt off. It's gone all crusty on the end of my soldering iron tip. It's nasty looking solder with no flux. What I'm going to do is the same again. I'm going to come in and we're just going to run the soldering iron across, and you can see again wonderful wetted solder, nice and shiny. Let's see how the MG Chemicals No Clean 8341 forms. I'm going to take my little pick and I'm just going to scrape some off the side like this, and then I'm going to come along and put it on the PCB. I'll get a little bit more than that, you know, you can never have too much flux as long as you clean it off afterwards. You're fine. There we go, got nice little blob on there now, should be fine. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm going to load it with solder. I'm going to wait for that flux to burn off and then we'll test it out. Okay, as you can see, I've let all that flux burn off and it's looking rather crusty. Let's go in and give it a try, and again we get really nice wetted solder, beautiful and shiny. And the final flux I want to show you is the MG Chemicals Liquid Flux 8351. I've got it in a little bottle here. Now there's a different way of doing this because it's made up of ethanol and alcohol. It evaporates really quick, so you've got to use it instantly. You've got to squirt it on and then go straight in. You can't put it on the board and then come back to it. So what I've done is, again, I've just loaded up my soldering iron with solder. I'm waiting for that flux to burn off, and then I'll come in and squirt some on and we'll show you what it looks like. As you can see, I've let all the flux burn off. We've got some crusty solder on there, so I'm going to come straight in with the no clean, squirt it on there, and then I'm going to come on with the crusty solder, and as you can see, perfectly beautiful wetted solder, nice and shiny. Now if you remember, when I first started, I actually used no flux, and you can see how horrible it looks. I'm going to show you how you can salvage it. I'm just going to come on with what I used. I like the ChipQuik, so I'm just going to come along with some ChipQuik Flux. I'm just going to put it over that crusty old solder that's on there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my soldering iron tip and I'm going to clean it where there's no solder on this tip. So I'm just going to be using the old crusty stuff that we originally put on there, and you can see my tip's nice and clean. Now watch this, remember it was old and crusty, and there we go, perfectly wetted solder joints. That's the power of flux, everyone. Now before I go, I know what some people are going to ask me as well. What type of solder do I use? Well, here it is. It's Kester 6040 rosin based solder. What I do, you may be seeing me use this quite a lot. What I do is I'll take a Sharpie like this and I'll just wrap round the solder around the Sharpie, and then I've got a little dispenser that I hold in my right hand because I'm left-handed when I'm soldering with the iron, and it allows me to hold it in my hand and I can feed in the solder like this, and I can pull it out the tube as I'm feeding it in. But yeah, this is what type of solder I use. Kester 6040 leaded rosin based solder. And there you go, that's the fluxes I use. If you want to, and leave a comment below what flux you use, because obviously other people swear by different fluxes. These are my go-to fluxes that I use all the time. But yeah, there you go guys. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe, all the usual stuff, and I'll catch you on the next one. A lot of flux. Catch you next time guys.